What is going on, guys? In this video today, we're going to be going over some more advanced aim tips for console Fortnite players. What that means is you won't see me saying things like, oh, if you want better aim, just practice more, or if you want better aim, find a sensitivity that you're really comfortable with. Even though those more basic tips are no doubt incredibly important, I'm sure you guys have already heard them a million times already. What we're going to focus on in this video is more situational and especially focused towards console players, since aiming on 60 FPS and below can be really challenging at times. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so the first thing I want to quickly mention is the value of using a low dead zone if you play on linear or exponential, which I guess everybody does, so yeah. That tip itself is relatively basic, but I have a feeling not many of you guys know why it's so important. So here's a short section of a clip that blew up maybe a month or two ago that kind of showcases it.
Look, I'm not touching my analog stick, but as you see it's moving. And the way linear works is, as long as your analog stick is moving, you'll get the full aim assist. And loads of controller players play with low dead zone because it makes your analog stick way more responsive. So let's say for example, if this guy just jumps, I'll let go of my controllers, and as long as I'm getting stick drift, okay, jump real quick. I don't even need to be. As long as there you go. I don't need to be touching my controller.
So basically, if you use a low enough dead zone to where you get a very slight amount of stick drift every once in a while, the game will basically track for you at point blank range even if you aren't moving your thumbstick. It probably isn't as OP as a lot of people think, because it's very rare that an enemy will get in front of your crosshair without you actively trying to track him, but here's an example of it in action from the Controller Pro CRR.
You cannot see a thing right now on PC. And he's already looking up. Look at that!
He probably couldn't even see that player at all because his entire screen was covered by an explosion, but because he was using a really low dead zone, the game basically followed the jumping player for him even though he wasn't moving his thumbstick. The next advanced tip I want to discuss is something that helped me improve my aim early in my Fortnite career, and that's focusing on placing the enemy in the middle of your screen instead of inside your crosshair. This is a tip that I actually first heard when playing Overwatch. What some players would do in that game to try to improve their aim was turn off their crosshair altogether. And the reasoning behind that was that it would force you to always position enemies in the dead center of your screen to where you wouldn't even need a crosshair to hit shots. Now, I probably wouldn't recommend doing exactly that in Fortnite, because with things like bloom and first shot accuracy, you almost need to see your crosshair to be successful, and honestly, I don't even know if Fortnite lets you disable it even if you wanted to. But the same principle definitely still applies here. With pretty much every weapon in the game having a different crosshair size, bloom, and bullet spread, your crosshair can actually kinda mislead you at times. However, if you're able to put an enemy you see in the middle of your screen, especially in close range fights, you're gonna hit most of your shots no matter what weapon you're using. By focusing on the placement of the enemy on your screen instead of the placement of the crosshair on the enemy, it kinda simplifies aiming a bit, which I think is something that's really gonna help a lot of players in the long run. And the good news is, if you practice and focus on this enough, eventually it'll become second nature like it probably is for most pros. The next advanced aiming tip/technique that I want to discuss is something I call left stick aiming. And that probably doesn't make very much sense to you at first, because obviously aiming is normally done with the right stick, but don't worry, I'll explain. So now that the majority of controller players are playing on linear, and on top of that also likely using a really low look dampening time, one aspect of aiming that's become kinda difficult is very slight crosshair adjustments. Maybe not so much at absolute point blank range, because you get that insane stickiness we've talked about many times before, but if you're, say, 3 to 5 meters away, the aim assist you get won't be anywhere near as strong, even though you're definitely still in a close range situation. So what a lot of players will struggle with is when their crosshair is just off their enemy's body. Not a lot, but still to where if they shoot, they're gonna miss the majority of their shots, or pellets if it's a shotgun. But then, when they try to flick it ever so slightly towards the direction of the enemy, since they're using such a low look dampening time, there's no aim acceleration whatsoever, and therefore they end up moving the crosshair past the enemy, and they have the same problem they started the fight with. One of the ways that you can counter this is adjusting your crosshair not with only the right thumbstick, but by mainly moving your left thumbstick to make your character move. As you'll see in this clip, even though my crosshair starts just off the sentry's body, I'm able to hit shots by strafing with my left stick and not even touching my right stick. However, that's obviously a bit of an extreme example. Most of the time, even when you're moving with your left stick, you still want to be adjusting your right stick ever so slightly. It's definitely a very situational tip that mostly applies to 50-50 spray SMG fights when you're either strafing or jumping, but the main advantage of incorporating left stick aiming is that it puts less pressure on you to track entirely with your right stick, because now your left stick is also doing some of the work for you. In general, it's going to make your aim less flicky and more tracky, which is very ideal for controller and console. The next aiming tip on our list is the importance of tracking and predicting enemy movement even if you aren't currently shooting at them. I would say the most common example of this happens during box fighting situations, and it's so frustrating to see people make this mistake. What'll happen is they'll force an enemy into a 1x1, and after doing that, they'll just kinda be looking at the front wall. Maybe they're about to try phasing through or breaking and replacing the wall, but at the moment they still have their weapon out. What the player should be doing / thinking in that situation is basically, as long as I have my shotgun in my hand, I should be following the enemy with my crosshair through the wall. That's the good thing about materials being transparent when they're first built. You can still see through them, and you'll even be able to mostly see through fully built wood. The reason why this is so important is because if it's a good player inside that 1x1, what he's gonna do in that situation if he sees you just kinda lollygagging around is make an edit on the wall and go for a shot or just straight up rush you. Now you need to do some crazy shotgun flick shot to try to deal damage, and if you end up missing, you're probably gonna die. Here's just a quick little clip of me showcasing the proper way to deal with this.
Oh, dude. Like a shit.
So in that example, I was caught in kind of this weird situation where I wasn't really sure what to do. My teammate was down, so I didn't want to disengage, and even though you couldn't hear it in that clip, I was asking my teammate whether or not he was weak because I wasn't sure if I was going to try to phase or break and replace the wall. But the entire time that was happening, I prevented myself from being a sitting duck by tracking the enemy even though there wasn't an immediate opportunity to shoot him. Because of that, when he tried to make an offensive play by opening his wall with an edit, I was totally prepared, and it resulted in me hitting an absolute layup high damage shotgun shot before he even had the chance to react. Now that's just one specific example, but similar situations will happen multiple times a game. If you're just constantly tracking your enemy, it's gonna set you up for some really easy shots. And if you choose not to, you better be a flick shotting god, or else you're gonna miss a ton of shots that you shouldn't. However, speaking of predicting enemy movement while tracking, the final aiming tip I want to discuss is not making the mistake of rushing your shot. Even though this is a problem that a lot of people have and it may sound kind of advanced, it can actually be boiled down to something as simple as this. Unless you're spraying a guy to where you don't really care if you miss a few shots, don't fire until you see your crosshair on the enemy. A lot of people will start to line up their shot while moving their crosshair, and they'll frequently shoot right before the crosshair touches the enemy because I guess they're scared he's gonna move or something and they don't want to miss the opportunity. That's an example of over-predicting and rushing your shot that can really hurt your aim, and trust me, it's something that so many people struggle with. It's worth taking the extra fraction of a second to make sure your shot is actually gonna land before you fire it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you watched the entire thing, be sure to let me know with a comment down the comment section below. I want to know, which weapon category do you think you have the best aim with in Fortnite? AR aim, SMG aim, or shotgun aim? Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.